Hello there, world history people. Let's learn all about Asia during the Age of Discovery, when the Asian part of the world is finally getting interconnected with the whole rest of the world. Let's do it. Here we go. Gotta make sure this button clicks. Okay, yep. All right, now it's working. So yeah, here's a map of the world way back then. So this is like around the year 1500. So you can see they got a really good idea of what Europe looks like, what most Africa looks like. The Americas is kind of a mess, but Asia is also kind of a mess too. Actually, I'm going to argue Asia is even more of a mess. Like they think like Australia goes all the way down here. That's super wacky. So Europeans are now filling out the map, seeing what's up with the whole planet, taking these big old caravel ships around everywhere they go. Here they are talking to some island people, probably teaching about Jesus. And then here's the Mori. These guys are really awesome. And yep, we're going to Japan. Finally getting all around the world now. Okay, so after the Mongols conquered Asia in the 1300s, this European merchant named Marco Polo, he was the first guy to go all the way from Europe to China and then back to Europe and tell the story about it. The voyage to China was always really, really dangerous and really, really rough before the times of Marco Polo, but this guy did it. And he told everyone of how rich China was, and he gave this idea to Europeans that if you could get to China, you could just become super duper duper rich. And he was really kind of the idol for so many people during this age of exploration. If you remember Christopher Columbus, he wanted, or well, really he thought he was like really close to China the whole time he was in America. Kept trying to find China, but he was, really, really far away still. And Marco Polo wrote this interesting book, and maybe I'll give you guys some passages to read from it, where he told of all these wild adventures he had when he was in China in the 1300s. He definitely was there. There are Chinese records that, this white dude named Marco Polo was hanging out there. But according to Marco Polo's side of the story, he saw some people with the faces of dogs. What else? He saw a palace literally made of gold. So he probably exaggerated some things, or probably got some things a little messed up in his head. All right, so yep, there's Marco Polo being a dude, hanging out in China. China's super duper fancy. Everyone wants to get to China. All right, and yes, so not only did he actually tell the tale, but he did bring some stuff back from China. He brought Chinese technology, like the clock, compass, and gunpowder. All these inventions were huge that helped fuel the Renaissance that really started to build up European power. But the issue is, so if China was this really, really rich and wealthy place, and if China invented all this stuff, why didn't the Chinese conquer the world? Well, it's because Chinese culture really valued tradition over innovation, and China never really had an event similar to Europe's Renaissance. The Chinese were just kind of cool with living their lifestyle and their technology of the 1300s all the way to the late 1800s. But once the Europeans got their hands on these inventions, it gave them the ability to travel the world and to really impose power over the world. So, all right, moving on. So, yep, there's the clock. And this is actually an early compass. Looks kind of cool. And then, yep, figuring out gunpowder, blowing up stuff. So, when the Europeans are now sailing all over the world, they encounter Qing Dynasty China. And the Qing Dynasty was kind of their whole vibe was build the Great Wall, keep everybody out. The Qing are cool. We don't want to take over any more land. Leave us alone. And yeah, be as isolated as possible. The Qing Dynasty lasts until the year 1911, so they go all the way up to just about 100 years ago. The Qing emperors were classic for being disconnected from their society. They had this huge, huge palace, and today it's known as the Forbidden City. I think this is technically the biggest house in the world. There's a picture of it down there. And today, the Forbidden City is this really cool museum. It's actually now the #1 museum in the world. All kinds of people go there and check it out, what it was like to be the Emperor of China. But during the Qing Dynasty times, the Emperor of China, he lived a fancy life. Like this Forbidden City, I think it's like 200 buildings, and almost all of them are buildings for his servants and his wives. And if you're the emperor of China, you lived an easy, easy life. And there were some emperors of China that never left the Forbidden City from the day they were born to the day they died. So if you're the leader of a country and you literally never leave your house, how are you going to know what it's like for the people of your country? And I'll be honest though, for most of the Qing Dynasty's time span, China was pretty stable and pretty great. But it was just near the end of the Qing Dynasty when things started to get really out of hand. And then the Qing emperors really showed how ineffective they were because they never really interacted with their common people. All right, that's all about the Qing Dynasty. Let's move it on down. So, yep, the Qing Dynasty, they had all kinds of land. They had even more land than China has today. And yep, there's the Qing Emperor sitting on the dragon throne. Isn't that cool? It's the dragon throne of China. And yep, here's the Forbidden City. So it's surrounded by this moat. And then here's the entrance. And it's just this giant, giant property for the Emperor of China to live on. And there's the Grand Palace. And the Forbidden City was almost entirely occupied by young Chinese women. Probably, emperors got a little eye candy going on. Chinese society really didn't want to interact with the outside world, but there was one thing the Qing emperor said the Chinese people still wanted, and that was silver. Weirdly enough, the Chinese didn't want gold or rubies or emeralds or any other fancy metals. They just wanted silver. They really liked silver. They thought it was cool, even though gold is technically better in every way. But yes, the Chinese definitely wanted silver, and Europeans wanted so much stuff that came out of China. They wanted those inventions, they wanted porcelain, they wanted silk, but the Chinese said, silver's the only thing we'll trade. So what happened for the vast majority of this time period was eventually when European ships started getting to China, they were stocked full of silver, and they would trade this silver for tea, for porcelain, for all those Chinese goods. The Chinese culture during this time, it was still sort of the same thing as it's always been in China. The vast majority of the people there are super poor farmers. They've got some great trading cities, some great water connections. Eventually, Europe will become so powerful they will actually take over China. But that's going to happen further down the road. And it's by only doing this kind of limited trading with the Europeans and not following them and sort of pursuing these inventions and these big ships to explore the world, China's going to get left behind, historically speaking. And it's going to get really bad in about 300 years. So here's some of those traditional rice farmers doing their things. And there they are seeing European ships come into Canton Harbor. Here's some Chinese guys holding hands, I guess. It's cool. Here's a silver Chinese teapot, so that's really something they really love silver for. And here's some of the rice terraces. So what they did is they take mountains and they kind of chop them up into these layered pieces. And then they create these little pools all up and down the mountain so they can grow rice in them. And they found out this is actually a really good way of growing rice. So it shows how hardcore the Chinese people were in really editing their landscape to fit human needs. Pretty cool. Let's continue this on with now the story of Ferdinand Magellan. So, Columbus's original goal was to set sail from Europe, head west, and eventually hit China. Columbus never did it. He ran into the Americas, and he got stuck here for the rest of his life. But a couple years later, there was this dude, well, really 30 years later, there's this dude named Ferdinand Magellan. He was a Portuguese guy. And he said, I'm going to sail all the way around the world. I'm going to do what Columbus failed to do. I'm going to start in Europe, sail west, and get to China. And he expected the voyage would be really easy. Actually, the voyage was super duper hard. It was significantly harder than if you had just sailed around Africa the other way. But they didn't know, so he's an explorer. He's tried it out. He's going to sail around the world, and he's sort of credited as the first person to actually go whoosh all the way around planet Earth. All right, let's check it out. So there's Ferdinand hanging out with his fleet. There's one of his ships sailing in the south side of the seas. And let me explain his journey real quick. So he started here in Portugal, and it took him about 3 months to get to the bottom of South America. And at the bottom of South America, you're so close to Antarctica, you're at the poles of the planet Earth. Like, the water and the seas in this part of planet Earth is just crazy. It's just huge waves, constant storm, really, really rough. So it took him an additional 3 months to find a way under South America. And then he starts sailing through the Pacific Ocean, and he's there for like 9 months. And that's when things get really rough. Okay, I'll keep talking about the story in the next slides. So, yeah, just as I said, the voyage was going pretty well until he got to the bottom of South America. The rough waters there, I said 6 months. The rough waters there held him up for 7 months and destroyed 2 of his ships. I think he only had 5 ships total. Once he actually found a way underneath South America in sort of a little bit calmer waters hidden by these islands, we've collectively renamed that part of planet Earth the Strait of Magellan. It's this special path he found to kind of cut through the very bottom tip of South America. So, yeah, his name is now on planet Earth because he figured it out. All right, and then here's sort of a map of his route around the world again. You see sort of how some of the shapes of planet Earth aren't fully identified. Like, all of North America is one big confusing mess. And then, yep, there they go under South America. And yeah, his ships were getting wrecked. Try sailing that ship through that ocean waters. Oh, goodness. And yep, some of the ships got stranded and stuck in ice. Ugh. Okay, so he eventually did get through the Pacific Ocean. The Pacific Ocean is super huge. It's like half of planet Earth. Some of his guys eventually started to eat rats as the way to survive on their ships. But they eventually did get all the way to the Philippines. And the Europeans had already known about the Philippines from their deals with China. So they're like, boom, we figured it out. We found a way around the world. So high five to Magellan. But Magellan then made a really dumb move. Because his guys were running out of supplies, he found this Filipino clan chieftain guy who said, hey, we'll give you all the supplies you need to get back to Europe if you go and you fight this enemy chieftain who lives on this other island. He's this guy named Lapu-Lapu. If you kill Lapu-Lapu, we'll give you everything you want. And Magellan's like, okay, yeah, we're Europeans, we've got guns, we've got iron weapons, we'll be fine. And hey, Magellan was an excellent sailor, but he was a terrible soldier. So Magellan and his men go and attack Lapu-Lapu, but Lapu-Lapu's waiting for him. And as Magellan and his men jump off their mini boats to invade this beach, Magellan and his guys are so stuck in their heavy armor they can't move very well. And then Lapu-Lapu and his dudes run up on him and beat them all to death. And yes, Magellan was killed. So should he really be given credit as being the person to go all the way around the world? Because, I mean, he kind of died once he got to the Philippines. So, that's a historical debate we could have. But some of Magellan's men did survive, enough to crew one ship. And the other Filipino chieftain they made a deal with kind of felt bad for him. So he gave them all the supplies they needed for one ship. And then they started sailing back to Europe, but this time still going west. So they're going to go around Africa and get back to Europe that way. All right, so there they are saying, what's up, Filipinos? We're coming from around the world. And Lapu-Lapu was beating them to death. And then, yep, there's Magellan getting speared. Okay, so his surviving crew continued all the way home. I said to Spain. Portugal, Spain, they're connected. And during the journey home, a lot more calamities occurred. A couple times they encountered islands with cannibals. And then what was especially weird is these guys really knew that these spices in the Philippines, I'm talking about cinnamon, pepper, clover, all of those items are basically free in the Philippines, but you could sell them in Europe for their weight in gold. And it was so many of these fancy European kings and queens who loved to have good tasting food. And so they would just fork out tons and tons of money to put these spices on their food to make their food taste better. So these surviving sailors, they sort of made the choice when they were in the Philippines. They could have loaded up their whole ship with, rice and dried meat, to help them survive the voyage. But instead, all these guys had such a bigger concept of, we want to make a whole lot of money when we get back to Europe, so we're going to fill up our ship with cinnamon, pepper, clover, stuff that we really can't eat. I mean, they did bring some food, but they underestimated how much they would need, so they were starving to death on a ship full of spices. Yeah, so that was a weird mistake they made. All right, so here they are sailing back from the Philippines. These are cloves. These are pepper. A lot of kids think these are grapes. Now they're pepper. And this is cinnamon. Yeah, cinnamon. And here's all kinds of spices. Spices are great. Okay, so out of those 5 ships and 270 men that started the voyage, only one ship with 18 guys returned. So almost everybody died. But that one ship was filled to the brim with cinnamon, clover, nutmeg, all those pepper, all those things. And that ship made so much money, it paid for the whole expedition twice over, and they paid off all the families of the guys who died. So it was a hugely lucrative thing to send a ship to Asia, fill it up with spices, fill it up with Asian goods, bring it back to Europe. You're going to make a lot of money. So kings and queens are now going to be obsessed with getting in the ship ocean trade game, and it's going to kind of set up the world history experience for the next 300 years. So here's a bunch of kings and queens eating fancy food, and it's all about getting some pepper and tea, no doubt. Okay, so Spain soon saw the wealth from all these spices in the Philippines, and Spain decided to send in a big old fleet of ships to take the country over. They didn't want to pay nothing for those spices. They wanted to get them all because they owned the country. And the Philippines would remain their country until the year 1898. So the Philippines is going to be kind of locked down in Spanish territory until about 100 years ago. And the Philippines does have a lot of lasting problems today because the islands of the Philippines have a lot of different cultures. The northern islands are now super duper Catholic Christian. The southern islands are still Muslim. You've got other islands in the middle that are like, local religions. So it's a kind of a disunified place, and they don't all even speak the same language too. So it's a kind of mix-matched country to a degree. But Filipinos are top quality people. High five to Filipinos. All about the lumpia. Bring it on. Okay, so here's what the Philippines looks like. All these different cultures living on those islands. Here they are, and Europeans are coming by. And then the Spanish, they did a lot of terrible stuff in the Philippines, converted just about everybody to the Catholic faith, and now Europeans are coming there and trading stuff with the Filipinos. All right, that's it for my video today. Peace out.